Welcome back. I've got Dana Cox on the line. Dana, how are you today?
I'm great, Michael. How are you?
I am really good and really looking forward to this conversation because you do some absolutely amazing work. Got a brand new book out and all kinds of different things. So, why don't you share a little bit about you and then we'll jump into this extremely important conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm Dana Cox, as you stated. I am the founder and CEO of Fix Coaching and Consulting. I help high achieving women to get position promoted and paid without the burnout. So that is the key, right? To get it all without the burnout. So that's really my mission and focus these days after stepping away from corporate.
Yeah, it's important work, and I've shared on the show a few times, uh, especially post-pandemic, and actually even during the pandemic, where I saw an alarming trend with female executives and females of all leadership levels. Whether you're frontline, you're still a leader in the front line, all the way up to CEO roles, where I was seeing, an alarming number of females leaving the workforce because COVID and the pandemic, it gave a lot of us a moment to reflect, and a lot of people decided, I'm going to take a step back or I'm going to step away from corporate or other roles because I want to focus more time on my family and things like that. And for me, it bothered me because and the reason why it bothers me is you shouldn't have to make that choice. You should be able to continue to be an executive or leader, whatever role, and also have a family. It shouldn't be an either or conversation. But unfortunately, the way that work has been designed, and we're still struggling with the design of what work looks like. Unfortunately, a lot of people feel and maybe are put in that position where they have to make that decision. And that's why it's so important that there's amazing people like you out there that can help people understand, especially female executives, but this is applicable to men too, but really, focus on how to harmonize all of those things so you can be excellent no matter what you're doing at home, work, everywhere in between.
So true, Michael. And what you say is true. It's really more about harmony, right? I think the phrasing in the marketplace has been work-life balance, right? Which denotes a 50-50 kind of equalization, but it's really about harmony because it looks very different for each and every one of us. And it does apply to men as well as to women. But the reason I focus on women is because I think that there is how I put it, I think that there is a third shift that women tend to take on that men don't necessarily have to. Especially when a woman is a wife, a mother, a caregiver, they're juggling many things, not just the workplace and not just home, right? They carry the mental load and of making sure that the orchestra that they are conducting, creates this beautiful music. They are thinking about the soccer uniforms. Have they been washed? Right. They're thinking about packing the lunch. They're thinking about the special project that the child has to do and making sure all the things are that are needed are in that place. And so their minds are always occupied with all of these things, even when they are at work and when they are at home. They're thinking about all the things, especially if they are a leader of people. They're thinking about all the other things, not just the work that they have to do, but the things that their team has to do when they're at home. So their mind is occupied with this, what I would call a third shift of things. And burnout is not just the physical aspect, it is really about the mental tax as well as the physical tax.
And I love how you shared that, that third spectrum. And even as you're explaining it, diving into it, and you mentioned, the female leader concerned about their employees. uh, they're not only concerned about their employees' well-being and their performance at work, but they're also imagining, okay, what's it like for them to run their household or their life, or they've got small kids that are involved in all kinds of activities. So you look at that, and it looks like this kaleidoscope of things that are in the minds, and it's like, no wonder you're tired. And this is a challenge to the husbands out there. step up as a being a dad. You know, mine are all adult, my kids are all adults now, but step up. You know, don't just, delegate all to your spouse to run the household. Step up. And that's just, and I'll be more than willing to go face to face with any dude on this that wants to combat me on that. Not violent. No, 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 no. But you need to step up because that the loads are just getting more and more complex. There's so many dynamics on things. Step up. Yes, I know you're working. Yes, I know you work long hours. We get that. We understand that. But as a dad, step up. And I'll share a side story real quick. Whenever I could, I would go field trips for my kids in their school, doing different things. And I kid you not, if there were 10 parents there, there may have been two dads, including myself. And it's like, well, because they're working. What, the moms aren't? Take time off, negotiate, work, do something. Go to those things because you know what? They go from you bring the baby home to they're an adult leading their own lives in an instant. So step up, dads. So I'll step off my soapbox now, but it's so critically important because, uh, and we've highlighted this on the show before, and I've talked about my first bosses when I first entered the workforce were all female, and I didn't know anything about the glass ceiling or any of those nuances until I got older and was like, "Oh, this doesn't seem fair at all. Why? They're doing the same job." But that could be a completely different episode. But again, going back to what you said before, just the complexity of leading your life, leading a business, leading your family. There's so many different moving parts, and harmonizing all those things is difficult. At least, if not, in some days, it probably feels impossible. So that's why it's so important that you take care of yourself. And I love your insights on this. In the teams you've worked with and the people you've worked with and all of that, my hunch, and correct me if I'm wrong, is in many cases their own self-awareness of what they're doing it isn't as strong as it could be. They're in many ways just kind of running on autopilot and they're not really fully aware of what's going on in your life. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
No, very true, Michael. It's really more of a conditioning, I would say. I mean, I've gone through my own bout of burnout and had no idea that I was on the fast path to it. Because I was also running on autopilot and doing what I saw done, doing what society said I was supposed to do, how I was supposed to do it. And the reality is the system is rigged. It's rigged and it's not really set up in the way that it should be set up. I think one thing that COVID did show us is that people are capable of being productive regardless of location, right? And I also think that we've learned, if you look at the data, right, and the information, is you create an environment where people can really flourish, and employees want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be understood, they want to be respected, right, and they want to be valued. And that leadership and management are completely different. And I also think that women show up in the leadership realm very different than men do. There is a level of investment in the people that they lead. They see them more as an extension of themselves. They're looking at trying to understand them as humans, so that they can get the best out of them. That's what we as is kind of like that nurturing aspect of us. And that is an additional load, but it really is about this conditioning, and we just kind of go with the flow and do what we've seen done all the time until one day you wake up and you've hit a wall.
Yeah, and we see time and time again with, leaders like yourself and other people that have burned out or are approaching burnout. In many cases, the work that they're doing that's leading them to, like I call Burnout Avenue or Burnout Street, is good work. It makes sense to do it. It's a good idea, but what happens many times is because we have so many other things going on in our lives that we aren't necessarily strong, and not that this is a skill that many people are born with, but we're not necessarily strong with harmonizing those things and understanding the ebbs and flows of things. And again, that goes back to the self-awareness component of it to, basically do that daily check-in and say, okay, where am I today? What's going on today? What do I need today to re-energize myself or replenish myself? And I'm not talking about, extra cups of coffee or 5 hour energy or sugary sweets or whatever you consume, and not being judgmental at all. What you do, whatever you want to do. But I find that for even for myself, that, when I wake up, I'm like, okay, how am I feeling? It's just like checking the systems. It's like, okay, let's check things. Where are we at energy wise? Okay, what any aches and pains? And as you get older, kids, you discover aches and pains in parts of your body that you didn't know you had. You're like, where did that come from? But you just you roll with it and go, okay, what do I need to do to ease that up? But understanding, okay, where you're at, and having the autonomy to kind of shift some things around, and exercise that I'm sure that you do, or some flavor of it, and I do it as well, is, I have a gauge of how my week looks or how my day looks. And thankfully, in most cases, I do have the ability to shift some things around if I need to, in order to either A, match my energy, or B, something comes up, I need to address it. So I always tell, business owners, executives in particular, or anybody else, it's like they say, well, let's line up a meeting, at 7 a.m. on Monday morning, before I go into the office. I'm like, and a lot of times I'd go, on a Monday, and we're recording this on a Monday, so but I have the flexibility because I purposely don't book things on Mondays ahead of time, so when things come up, we can have, an important conversation like this. But for many, it's like they get everything. It's like, okay, Monday morning I'm gonna do this and this and this. But then this crazy thing happens called the weekend, and crap breaks over the weekend for some reason. I don't know why, but it just does. So you go rolling into your workplace, and many times it's like you're driving this boat, and all of a sudden water's coming in a variety of different places. Okay, we got to plug these waters. Well, if you're plugging the water, you're not dealing with what you had scheduled to do. But
Mhm.
again, you have to understand, and this is where, again, I keep going back to the self-awareness thing. You have to understand when you're most productive and when you're not. And, going back to your comment about COVID and how we could work, and do a lot of great work after hours or remotely or whatnot, is a lot of people by accident in many cases discovered, they're more productive at quote unquote off hours than they are in that quintessential 9 to 5 block that we've all been sequestered to, for decades in the workplace. And it gave some, a lot of enlightenment to people and organizations that were willing to be open to it, to recognize that, okay, I know my people, and they're more productive from 4 to 6 p.m. than they are from 9 to 12. Okay, why am I
Mhm.
having them do work at 9 to 12? And again, it's understanding people, and I love how you said that a moment ago, is, and I notice this too, especially with, more prone to female leaders. I have seen men leaders do this too, but it's definitely a trait, a common trait that I see in a lot of female leaders is and I think it's that motherly nurturing component, even if they're not a parent. It's just
Right.
in the makeup of them to nurture. And by
Mhm.
nurture, like tending a garden, you want it to grow, you want it to thrive, you want it to be successful. So there's that element on there, which in many cases can lead to burnout amongst leaders, because you're so focused on making everybody else better, you're not focusing on how you can be better.
Yeah. And I love how you said this, the check-in, right? And I think that that's the thing that's missing a lot of times is we are always looking outside of ourselves, right? We're worried about everyone else and how they're feeling, how they're doing, that we don't really take the time to account and read ourselves to determine what is best, right? Is this optimal for me? I also think that we take things on even though we don't want to, or we don't have the capacity to, because we're prioritizing the feelings of the other person on the other side of that thing. We don't want to say no to them because we don't want to let them down. And in saying no to someone else, it's when you say, let me put it this way, when you say yes to someone else's priorities, you're saying no to one of your own. And so it's really getting clear on what does this yes to Bob cost me? Because there's a cost to everything.
Yeah, it's important, and I have a phrase. It's not mine. I saw it years ago. No is a complete sentence, and even the memo that President Harry Truman sent to the Russian leader shortly after World War II, because Stalin wanted something, and Truman telegraphed him. You know, telegraph was a simple telegraph. He said no. Period. And there was no elaboration, anything like that, which I know sometimes can irritate some people. Like, what do you mean, no? But again, I see this a lot too, and it's not. I don't want to say it's gender specific, but I identify as a reformed people pleaser. You know, I want people to be their best. I want to do everything I can to help them, but I recognized slowly and much later in life that I was doing that to my own detriment, and I saw my late mother and father do that as well. You know, where they were so giving and so supportive, and you know would give literally the shoes off their feet. But it's like, well, now you don't have any shoes. You're not, you, yes, you're helping somebody else, but you're hurting you. And it shouldn't be that decision to do that. So let's segue to your brand new book. You've got a brand new book that just came out. So let's talk about that. So, you know, what's it called and what's it about?
So it's called From Burnout to Badass, flipping the script on your work life story. It's really a lot of what this conversation is about. It's partly my journey to burnout and recovery from burnout, and some of the things that I've done and researched to help to flip that script on the status quo of how we show up in work and in life in order to be able to have what I like to say a thriving professional success, but also that personal fulfillment, right? Without having to sacrifice your Saturday nights or your weekends in order to be able to do that.
And that's so important to remind ourselves of is we can, pardon the phrase, you know, have our cake and eat it too. You know, we can be absolutely amazing at what we do and enjoy what we do without it taking a long-term toll on us. And when I think back to my burnout journey, again, the things that we're doing that led up to it were all quote unquote good things to do. But I didn't have, quite frankly, a governor to kind of hold back and restrict and have boundaries around when I worked and when I didn't. And, you know, it took a pretty big toll on me. And, you know, thankfully I survived it, slowly learned from it, you know, and realized, wait a minute, I don't want to do that again. That I need to approach this differently, which when you're an adult, reinventing yourself, and I always do this for anybody that's burning out, I always tell them, most of you do not need to reinvent your life. And you got to make some adjustments here and there. In my particular journey, I looked at that and like, no, we're just going to empty this complete junk drawer here of how I've been living. We're going to dump everything out. We're going to start from scratch and we're going to rebuild piece by piece. Was that the best way to do it? That's up for debate, but for me, it worked. But I always frame that. It's like I don't want people to think that they have to just completely change who they are because, in all honesty, you probably don't. There's some amazing character traits that people have, and there's just, you know, adjustments here and there. And I know you highlight a lot of those in the book through your own experiences, of course, but you know, observations of people you've worked with and experiences you've had in the corporate world.
Yeah. So you're so right, Michael. You don't have to like tear the house down to the studs, right? To get the layout and the design that works for you. But I think the first thing is you need to do is get really clear on what it is that you want, right? I am a firm believer that individuals can have it all. I think the thing for, and I'm speaking from a place of a woman, right? I think the definition of what all looked like was given to me, and I kind of just absorb that as the quote unquote, gold star of what having it all really looked like. And for me, that's what I was chasing. But then one night I caught my own reflection in the kitchen window and didn't recognize the woman staring back at me, who had, a lot of health my health had gone to the crapper. I was definitely carrying more weight than I should have. I was around 287 pounds. And speaking about those aches that you didn't even know, those I learned a lot about aches and pains and parts of my body that I didn't even know existed because of the weight that I was carrying. But not just the physical weight, the emotional weight. There's different types of weight that you carry. And I didn't really realize how I had got there. And I knew it wasn't overnight. So I knew getting back from that place wasn't going to be an overnight accomplishment either. But similar to you, I dump the junk drawer and, like I said, we're just going to start fresh. But it's not required, it's not necessary. I think it's really important to get clear on what does your ideal state of life look like, both personally and professionally. Because once you're clear on what it looks like, then you know what you need to change, what changes you need to make in order to bring that about, to make that a reality. And not everything has to be thrown out. Not everything has to be redone or recreated or restructured in order to make that possible. It can be simple as establishing some boundaries, or carving out time for yourself, that you don't give away for anyone, right? You really just kind of, this is the thing that lights me up. And that might be something as simple as sitting on my sofa, curled up with a good book and a cup of hot tea on a Saturday and doing absolutely nothing but that. But that's okay. And that's my time. I've carved it out for this day, this half a day, whatever that time is. And it doesn't matter what comes up or what anyone else needs. This is the thing that fills my cup. And in order for me to be my best self in every environment, I need to do this thing for me. That's not selfish. It's absolutely necessary. You cannot give from an empty tank. You can't pour from an empty cup. So how are you refueling yourself?
And that's what's so important is when I work with people, and I'm sure you've encountered this as well. They're like, yeah, but they need me. I have to be there for them. And I remind them that, yeah, but what version of you is showing up? Because if you are completely fulfilled and you're fully energetic, you feel good, life is amazing. And you just literally, when you walk, you feel like you're walking on air because you're in that space of, I'm doing what I want, where I want, and when I want, and how I want to do it. When you do show up to give or help or lead or whatever you do in life, the recipient is getting an absolutely amazing version of you, and they're going to notice it. And fingers crossed, they'll go, wow, Dana's living the best life. I want a part of that. Why, why, how is she so energetic, or how is Mike so energetic? How is he always this, giving and all this stuff, and he doesn't look drained. He looks, like he's living his best life. I want in on that. How are you doing that? Because they, more likely than not, they know how productive. I don't like saying busy. How productive we are and what we're accomplishing. And they're like, well, how are you doing all of that? And it's like, well, it's a lot to do with understanding where we are energetically speaking, and what we allocate our time to and what we don't, and
Mhm.
really having a good grasp of, quite frankly, how we spend our time. And that's another thing with self-awareness. A lot of people say, I just don't have time to do it, and I'll ask them, okay, I'm not being judgmental at all, but how are you spending your time? What's your time look like? What's your calendar look like? What are you doing after quote unquote work? What's that look like for you? And in many cases, they really don't know, because again, they hit that autopilot button. They're just kind of going through life, but they're not living life. And if you switch that up a little bit and you start living your life, all of a sudden life tastes better, you feel better, you're accomplishing a lot more of the things you want to do. And that's when you start seeing some im- just absolutely amazing and incredible improvements in your life, not just from a work life, but spiritually, family, friends, relationships. Life is meant to be experienced and tasted. And when you're burned out, you don't taste anything. Everything tastes like, a $2 steak. It's tough. no flavor, it's not good. So ideally, you wanna have, if you're a steak eater, you want to have the best flavorful steak. Yeah, if you're vegetarian or vegan, you want the foods you're eating, whether it's a vegan dish, a casserole, whatever you happen to be eating, you want to experience all those flavors. You want your taste buds to go, whoa, there's a lot going on here, and trying to identify all the things. But you're excited. You're like, oh, that's so amazing. That's, when you're not burned out, you taste things again, and it's such an amazing experience. I'm thankful that I get to live that type of experience day after day.
Yeah, no, you said something. I like to tell my clients time is currency, right? So how are you going to spend your time is really, no different than how you budget your finances. You need to budget your time just as wisely, so you only have a finite amount of that, right? How do you want to use it? And what are you spending that time on? Really look at it through that lens, which is really important.
Yeah, it's so important. So, Dan, I've loved this conversation. Where can people find out more about you, the book, and everything else you're doing?
So the book is available. It's available through me on my website, danalcox.com, but it's also available at Barnes and Noble, Goodreads, and Amazon. So all great locations where it can be found. People can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm there every day, all day, lots of days. But also I'm on Facebook and Instagram as well. So I really appreciate this time and in conversation with you, Michael. I could talk to you for a long time, for sure.
Oh, agreed. Yeah, and I'll definitely make sure I have all those links in the show notes. So, Dana, thank you for being you. The world needs more people like you that are out there bringing awareness to how important taking care of yourself is, and how you can navigate if you are burned out, how to, you know, I love the title of the book too. From burnout to badass. World needs more badasses, and you're definitely one of them. So, thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.